My daughter-in-law Lauren screamed the words across the wedding reception hall with enough venom to silence 200 guests mid-toast. "Go away and never come back. You're not welcome here, you never were, and you never will be." And every eye in that gilded ballroom turned toward me, standing near the exit with my coat already on, and I just smiled the way I'd learned to smile over 30 years of listening to secrets that could destroy empires. And I said quietly but clearly enough for the front tables to hear, "Okay, Lauren, but I'll be taking a few people with me." And when she saw Malcolm Strickland stand up from his table, followed by Victoria Hayes, then James and Patricia Drummond, then the Kowalski brothers, and finally Douglas Chen, wait, I can't use that name, Douglas Freeman, the tech billionaire whose company just went public for $18 billion, her face went from smug satisfaction to confusion to absolute horror in about 5 seconds, and she screamed again. But this time, it was the sound of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time, because Lauren had spent 2 years planning this wedding to connect herself to power and wealth and influence, and she'd specifically demanded I be excluded from the ceremony itself. But my son Rudolph had insisted I at least come to the reception, and now she was watching roughly 40% of her guest list, the 40% that mattered, the 40% with the real money and connections, walk out behind me like I was the Pied Piper of Manhattan's elite, and she had no idea why these people would follow a 62-year-old man who lived in a modest apartment and drove a 15-year-old Volvo. But I knew exactly why. Because I'd spent 3 decades as their therapist, their confessor, their secret keeper, and when you know someone's deepest pain and darkest fears, and you help them carry that burden without judgment, they develop a loyalty that transcends social conventions and wedding politics. My name is Dr. Michael Hartley, and this is the story of how my daughter-in-law learned that power isn't always visible, influence isn't always loud, and some battles are lost before they even begin. Let me back up 6 months to explain how we got here. My son Rudolph met Lauren 3 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. Rudolph worked in corporate law at a mid-tier firm, made good money but nothing spectacular. Lauren worked in event planning for high-end clients, which is how she'd gotten into the gala in the first place. She was beautiful, ambitious, and smart. I saw that immediately when Rudolph brought her to dinner at my apartment. She asked good questions, made intelligent observations, and seemed genuinely interested in Rudolph. But there was something else too, something I recognized from years of clinical practice. She was calculating. The way her eyes swept my apartment, pricing everything, noting the worn furniture and the dated decor. The way she asked what I did for a living and then dismissed it with a polite smile when I said I was a therapist. The way she steered conversation toward Rudolph's career prospects and his family connections. "Your father must have some interesting clients," she said to Rudolph over dessert. "Therapists to the wealthy, that's quite a niche." "I work with whoever needs help," I said neutrally. "Wealth doesn't make you immune to pain." "Of course not," she agreed quickly. "I just mean, you must have some fascinating stories." "I have confidentiality agreements and professional ethics," I said. "The stories stay private." She smiled, but her eyes were disappointed. She'd been fishing to see if I had useful connections. When she realized I wouldn't share client information or leverage my practice for social gain, I dropped several points in her estimation. Rudolph was oblivious. He was in love, and Lauren was good at being lovable when it served her purposes. They got engaged after 18 months. The engagement party was at a restaurant Lauren chose, with a guest list Lauren curated. I noticed Rudolph's college friends were minimally represented while Lauren's professional contacts dominated the room. "She's very organized," Rudolph said when I mentioned the lopsided guest list. "She works in events, Dad. She knows how to put these things together." "I'm sure she does," I said. "I just want to make sure you're happy." "I'm happy," he insisted. "I love her." "Then I'm happy for you." But I wasn't. Not entirely. I'd seen this pattern before in couples therapy. One partner who viewed relationships as transactions, who calculated value and return on investment, who saw love as a vehicle for advancement rather than an end in itself. These relationships sometimes worked if both people understood and accepted the terms, but Rudolph didn't understand. He thought Lauren loved him for who he was, not for what he could provide or what connections he might offer. The wedding planning began immediately. Lauren wanted the Plaza Hotel. Rudolph pointed out they couldn't afford it. Lauren said her parents would help. Then Lauren's parents backed out when they saw the budget Lauren had proposed, and suddenly Rudolph was on the hook for a $170,000 wedding. "Dad, I need to borrow money," Rudolph said over lunch 6 months before the wedding. "Just $50,000. I'll pay you back over the next few years." "Why do you need $50,000? "The wedding. Lauren's parents can't contribute as much as they thought, and we're short." "Why does the wedding cost so much?" "Because it's at the Plaza, and we're inviting 300 people, and Lauren has very specific ideas about how everything should look." "Rudolph, you're 32 years old. You make $140,000 a year. You cannot afford this wedding." "I know, but Lauren's heart is set on it. This is her dream wedding." "Dreams need to fit reality. Talk to Lauren about scaling back." "I tried. She got really upset. She said this was the most important day of her life and I was trying to ruin it." I sighed. "Who are these 300 people?" "Lauren's guest list is 200. Mine is 100. "You know 100 people you want at your wedding?" "Not exactly." Lauren cut my list down. She said some of my friends wouldn't fit the aesthetic she was going for. "The aesthetic?" "You know, the vibe, the atmosphere. She's very detail-oriented." I looked at my son, this good man who worked hard and loved deeply, and I saw him being manipulated by someone who viewed him as a means to an end. But I also knew that telling him this directly would only push him away. "I'll lend you the money," I said finally. "But Rudolph, I want you to really think about what you're doing. Marriage is a partnership. If one person is making all the decisions and the other is just financing them, that's not a partnership." "It's just wedding stress," Rudolph said. "Once we're married, everything will settle down." I gave him the money. I knew it wouldn't settle down, but some lessons can only be learned through experience. The real trouble started 2 months before the wedding when Lauren's event planning company was hired to organize a corporate retreat for Strickland Industries. Malcolm Strickland was one of my clients, had been for 15 years. He was a shipping magnate worth about $800 million, and he'd first come to me after his second divorce nearly broke him emotionally. Malcolm saw Lauren's name on the planning documents and made the connection to Rudolph, my son, who I'd mentioned occasionally in our sessions over the years. "Small world," Malcolm said during one of our sessions. "The woman organizing our retreat is marrying your son." "Yes," I said neutrally. "Rudolph seems very happy. I've only dealt with her on email so far, but she seems competent." "I'm sure she is." The retreat happened, and apparently it went well. But a week later, Malcolm called me outside of our regular session time, which was unusual. "Michael, I need to talk to you about something sensitive," he said. "Not in the office. Can we meet somewhere private?" We met at a quiet bar in the West Village. Malcolm looked troubled. "Lauren approached me at the retreat," he said. "During the cocktail hour, she pulled me aside and said she understood I was your client. She said she was going to be your daughter-in-law soon, and she wanted to establish a relationship with people in your professional circle." My stomach sank. What exactly did she say? She implied that she knew I must have interesting business opportunities, and that once she was family, maybe you'd be more comfortable making introductions. She said it very carefully, very subtly, but the message was clear. She wanted access to your client network. "Malcolm, I need to be very clear about something. I have never discussed you or any other client with Lauren or with anyone else. I never will. My professional ethics are absolute." "I know that," Malcolm said. "I've known you 15 years, Michael. I trust you completely. That's why I'm telling you this. Lauren is trying to leverage your relationships, and she's doing it in a way that makes you look complicit." "What did you tell her?" I told her that if I wanted to work with her professionally, I'd contact her through her company. Then I excused myself. But Michael, you need to know that she's doing this. If she's approaching me, she's probably approaching others. He was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I got similar calls from 3 other clients. Victoria Hayes, a venture capitalist worth about $2 billion. James Drummond, a real estate developer. Patricia Drummond, his wife, and a pharmaceutical executive. Each of them had encountered Lauren at various events. She seemed to be targeting gatherings where my clients might appear, and each time she'd found a way to mention that she was marrying my son and would soon be family. "She's collecting names," Victoria told me bluntly. "She's figuring out who you work with, and she's trying to position herself as an access point. It's actually quite clever if it wasn't so unethical." I called Rudolph and asked him to come to my apartment. "Is Lauren approaching my clients?" I asked directly. Rudolph looked uncomfortable. "She mentioned meeting some interesting people at a few events. She said they knew you." "Did she ask you for names? My client list?" "She asked if you ever talked about work. I said no, you were very private." "That's correct, I am. Rudolph, what your fiancée is doing is deeply problematic. She's trying to use my professional relationships for her own benefit. That's not just unethical, it could damage my practice and violate confidentiality protocols. Dad, I think you're overreacting. Lauren is just networking. That's what people do in business. She's not networking on her own merit. She's using her connection to me to imply she has access to privileged information or special influence. That's different. She hasn't done anything wrong. She's approached at least 4 of my clients inappropriately. That's wrong, Rudolph." "How do you even know this? Have your clients been talking about her behind her back?" "My clients told me directly because they were concerned about the ethical implications." Rudolph stood up, angry now. "So your clients are more important than your own son? You believe them over Lauren?" "Rudolph, this isn't about belief. This is about professional boundaries that exist for good reasons." "I think Lauren is right about you," Rudolph said coldly. "You care more about your precious boundaries than about family." "What did Lauren say about me?" "She said you were distant, cold, that you treated everyone like a patient instead of a person, that you hid behind professional ethics because you didn't know how to have real relationships." Each word landed like a punch. Lauren had been working on Rudolph, poisoning him against me, preparing him to take her side when this inevitable confrontation happened. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly. "But my position stands. Lauren needs to stop approaching my clients. If she doesn't, I'll have to take more direct action." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll make it clear to my professional network that Lauren speaks only for herself and has no connection to my practice or my clients." "You'd humiliate her like that? Right before our wedding?" "I'd protect my clients and my professional integrity. That's my job." Rudolph left without saying goodbye. We didn't speak for 3 weeks. Then, 1 month before the wedding, Rudolph called and said Lauren wanted to meet with me to clear the air. We met at the same bar where I'd talked with Malcolm. Lauren arrived 15 minutes late, apologized charmingly, and ordered a glass of wine. "Michael," she said warmly, "I feel like we got off on the wrong foot. Rudolph told me you were concerned about some interactions I had with people who happened to be your clients." "That's correct. I want you to know that was never my intention to cause any issues. I'm naturally friendly. I work in an industry where networking is essential, and when I meet people who know you, I like to establish that connection. I'm going to be your daughter-in-law soon. I thought it was appropriate." "The appropriate thing would be to keep your professional networking separate from your family connections. My client's relationship with me is confidential and professional. You leveraging that relationship even indirectly is inappropriate." "I understand that now," she said, her tone conciliatory. "And I apologize if I crossed any lines. It won't happen again." I didn't believe her, but I nodded. "Thank you." "I also want to address something else," Lauren continued. "The wedding. Rudolph mentioned you offered to help financially, which was very generous. But I want to make sure you feel included in the planning process. I'm fine not being included. This is your and Rudolph's day. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the guest list. We're at capacity at the plaza, and we've had to make some difficult decisions about who to invite to the ceremony versus who to invite just to the reception. Okay. Rudolph's side of the family is quite large, and unfortunately, to accommodate everyone, we've had to create a ceremony-only list and a reception-only list. Given that you contributed financially, we wanted to give you the option of which list you'd prefer to be on. I understood immediately what she was doing. She was giving me a choice between attending the ceremony or the reception, knowing that either way I'd be excluded from half the event. It was a power play, a way of showing me she controlled access to my own son's wedding. I'll attend the reception, I said calmly. I'm sure the ceremony will be beautiful without me. Are you sure? Because the ceremony is really the heart of the wedding. I'm sure. She smiled, satisfied. Great. We'll make sure you have a good table at the reception. I left that meeting knowing that Lauren was not going to stop. She'd given me a placating apology while simultaneously insulting me by excluding me from the ceremony. She viewed me as an obstacle to be managed, not as Rudolph's father, or as someone deserving of respect. Over the next month, I quietly reached out to my clients, not to gossip about Lauren, but to make something clear. If they were invited to Rudolph's wedding, and they felt uncomfortable attending because of Lauren's previous approaches, I would understand completely, and there would be no professional repercussions. Several of them had indeed been invited. Lauren had somehow gotten their contact information, probably through Rudolph, who didn't understand what she was really doing, and had sent them personal invitations along with the formal ones. She's persistent, Victoria said. I'll give her that. You don't have to come, I said. I know it's awkward. Michael, I've known you for 12 years. You've helped me through some of the darkest moments of my life. If your daughter-in-law thinks she can use your relationships without understanding what those relationships are based on, she's about to learn a lesson. I'll be there. Malcolm said the same thing. So did the Drummonds, the Kowalski brothers, and several others. They were coming not because they wanted to celebrate Lauren's social climbing, but because they wanted to support me. This is going to backfire on her, Malcolm said. She doesn't understand what she's dealing with. What do you mean? She thinks we're here because of business opportunities or social connections. She doesn't understand that we're here because you've earned our loyalty through years of helping us when we were at our most vulnerable. That's not something she can tap into or exploit, and when she tries, she's going to alienate the very people she's trying to impress. I don't want to ruin Rudolph's wedding. You won't, but Lauren might ruin it herself. The wedding day arrived. The Plaza Hotel was decorated beautifully. Lauren had spared no expense, mostly Rudolph's expense through the loan I'd provided. I arrived at the reception hour, having skipped the ceremony as instructed by the bride. The reception hall was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, white flowers everywhere, a band setting up in the corner, tables set with china that probably cost more per place setting than most people spend on dinner. I checked the seating chart and found myself at table 17, far from the head table, seated with some of Rudolph's distant cousins I'd met twice. Malcolm Strickland was at table 3, near the front. Victoria Hayes was at table 4. The Drummonds were at table 5. Lauren had clearly studied the seating politics carefully, placing the wealthiest and most influential guests where they'd be visible and accessible to her. I made my way to table 17 and introduced myself to the cousins. They were nice people, a bit overwhelmed by the opulence of the event, clearly not part of Lauren's target demographic. This is something, huh? One of them said, looking around. Rudolph really married up. She certainly throws a good party, I agreed neutrally. The cocktail hour passed. Rudolph and Lauren arrived, having completed their photographs. Lauren looked radiant in a dress that had probably cost $20,000. Rudolph looked happy, but tired. They made their rounds, greeting tables in order of importance. By the time they reached table 17, most of the other guests had already started eating their salads. "Dad," Rudolph said, giving me a hug. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said. "Congratulations to both of you." Lauren smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Michael, so glad you could make it to the reception." The emphasis on reception was subtle but clear. She was reminding me that I'd been excluded from the ceremony. "It's a beautiful event," I said. "You did an amazing job with the planning." "Thank you. I noticed some of your colleagues are here." She gestured toward the front tables. "I was hoping you might make some introductions later." "They're not colleagues, they're clients. And no, I won't be making introductions. Our professional relationships are confidential." "Oh, I didn't mean anything official. Just casual, social introductions. We're all here to celebrate, after all." "Lauren, I've been clear about this boundary. Please respect it." Her smile turned cold. "Of course. I wouldn't want to ask you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, even on your own son's wedding day." She moved on to the next table, leaving Rudolph standing there awkwardly. "Dad, would it kill you to be a little more flexible?" Rudolph said quietly. "This is her wedding day." "It's your wedding day too, Rudolph. And my answer is the same as it's been for months. I don't leverage my professional relationships for personal gain, and I don't appreciate being asked to do so." "She's going to be my wife, our family. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means I want to protect both of you from the consequences of inappropriate behavior. My clients are private people who value discretion. If Lauren continues pushing for access to them, she's going to create problems that can't be easily fixed." Rudolph shook his head and walked away. I sat down to my now cold salad and tried to enjoy the evening. About an hour into dinner, I noticed Lauren working the room. She'd stopped at table 3 and was talking to Malcolm Strickland. From my angle, I could see Malcolm's polite but distant expression, the way he nodded minimally and avoided eye contact. Victoria Hayes was at the same table, and when Lauren tried to include her in the conversation, Victoria smiled and said something brief before turning back to her dinner companion. Lauren moved to table 4, then table 5, then table 6. Each time, she was met with polite but clear disengagement. My clients knew what she was doing, and they weren't playing along. I watched Lauren's frustration grow. She'd curated this guest list carefully, placed these influential people prominently, and now they were treating her like any other bride making small talk at her reception. She'd expected something more, deference maybe, or at least engagement. She wasn't getting it. Around 9 o'clock, I decided to leave. I'd fulfilled my obligation by attending. The evening was clearly winding down, and I had no desire to prolong the uncomfortable situation. I stood up, put on my coat, and started toward the exit. I'd parked my car in a garage 2 blocks away, planning to walk there and drive home. I'd just reached the doorway when I heard Lauren's voice behind me, loud enough to carry across the ballroom. "Michael, are you leaving already?" I turned. Lauren was standing in the center of the dance floor, microphone in hand. She'd apparently taken it from the band leader to make an announcement. Every eye in the room was now on us. "Yes," I said simply. "It's getting late." Without saying goodbye? Without even congratulating Rudolph properly? "I congratulated him earlier. I'm sure you both will be very happy." "No, I don't think you do wish us happiness," Lauren said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that was starting to curdle into something harder. "I think you've been undermining this wedding from the beginning, making things difficult, refusing to be supportive." The room had gone completely silent. Rudolph was standing near the head table, looking horrified. "Lauren, this isn't the time or place," he started. "No, Rudolph, I'm tired of this," Lauren interrupted. "Your father has been cold and distant throughout our entire relationship. He's never approved of me. He's never welcomed me into the family. He's been judgmental and superior, and he's made no effort to hide it." That's not true, I said calmly. I've been cordial and respectful. Cordial? You've been calculating. You've kept your distance. You've refused to help us connect with people who could be beneficial to Rudolph's career. You've put your own precious professional boundaries ahead of your son's happiness. My professional boundaries exist for good reasons. Your professional boundaries are an excuse. You're a therapist, not a spy. These people aren't sources you need to protect. They're just wealthy clients who pay you to listen to their problems. And yes, I know who they are. I've done my research. Malcolm Strickland, Victoria Hayes, the Drummonds, the Kowalskis, Douglas Freeman, all of them sitting here at my wedding, and you won't even introduce me properly to them. The clients she'd named were now very still, very quiet. Lauren had just publicly identified them as therapy clients, which was a massive breach of their privacy. Lauren, stop, Rudolph said, moving toward her. You need to stop right now. No, I'm tired of pretending. Your father sits in his little apartment acting like he's so ethical and so superior, but really he's just a controlling old man who can't stand to see you building a life without him. I stood there, watching my daughter-in-law destroy herself in real time, and I felt something unexpected. Pity. She'd worked so hard to orchestrate this perfect wedding, to place all the right people in all the right positions, and now she was unraveling it all, because she couldn't control her frustration at not getting what she wanted. I'm going to leave now, I said quietly. Rudolph, I love you. I wish you both well. I turned toward the door again. Go away then, Lauren shouted. Go away and never come back. You're not welcome here. You've never been welcome. I don't want you in our lives. I don't want you at family gatherings. I don't want you around our future children. Just go. The room was frozen. 200 people watching a bride have a complete meltdown at her own reception. I paused at the doorway and turned back one more time. Lauren was standing there, microphone in hand, breathing hard, mascara starting to run from tears of rage. Okay, Lauren, I said calmly. I'll leave, but I'll be taking a few people with me. I said it quietly, but in the silence of that ballroom, everyone heard. Lauren laughed, a harsh sound. What? You think anyone cares enough about you to walk out of my wedding? Malcolm Strickland stood up. He carefully folded his napkin, placed it on the table, and walked toward me. Lauren's laugh died in her throat. Victoria Hayes stood up next, then James and Patricia Drummond, then the Kowalski brothers, 3 men who ran a construction empire worth about $600 million. Then Douglas Freeman, the tech billionaire who'd been sitting quietly in the corner. One by one, 12 people, approximately 40% of the most influential guests at that wedding, stood up and walked toward the exit where I was standing. Lauren's face went from confusion to realization to absolute horror. Wait, she said. Wait, what are you doing? Why are you? You just publicly identified us as this man's clients, Victoria said coldly. You violated our privacy to make some petty point. And you did it at a wedding we attended as a courtesy to someone we respect deeply. We're leaving. But I didn't mean... I was just... You were trying to use our names as leverage, Malcolm said. You've been doing it for months. We've been patient because of Michael and because of Rudolph. But you just crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Please, Lauren said, and now she was actually begging. Please don't leave. I'm sorry. I was upset. I didn't mean... You meant every word, Patricia Drummond said. You've meant it for months. You've been working angles, collecting names, trying to figure out how to monetize relationships that aren't yours to monetize. You thought we were here because of business or social climbing. You don't understand that we're here because Michael helped us when we were broken. That's not something you can fake or manipulate. The 12 people gathered around me at the exit. We walked out together, leaving Lauren standing in the center of the ballroom with a microphone in one hand and her wedding in ruins around her. We stood on the sidewalk outside the plaza for a moment, letting the cold November air clear our heads. I'm sorry you all had to witness that, I said. Don't apologize, Malcolm said. We knew this was coming. She's been building toward it for months. I didn't think she'd implode quite so spectacularly, Victoria said, but I'm not surprised. What happens now? Douglas Freeman asked. He was the youngest of the group, only 42, and he'd been my client for just 3 years. For Rudolph, I mean. That's up to Rudolph, I said. He's married now. He'll have to decide what he wants his life to look like. He seems like a good kid, Malcolm said. Hopefully he'll see what just happened for what it is. We said our goodbyes. Most of them had drivers waiting. I walked to my parking garage alone, paid the attendant, and drove home to my modest apartment. I didn't hear from Rudolph for 3 days. Then he called and asked if he could come over. He arrived looking exhausted. He'd clearly been crying recently, and he hadn't shaved in days. "Dad?" he said as soon as I opened the door. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Come in, Rudolph. Sit down." We sat in my small living room, the same room where Lauren had once silently judged my furniture and concluded I wasn't worth her time. "Lauren had a complete breakdown after you all left," Rudolph said. "She locked herself in the bridal suite and wouldn't come out. The rest of the reception was a disaster. People didn't know what to do. Some of them left, some of them stayed and pretended nothing happened. It was humiliating. I'm sorry that happened on your wedding day. Don't apologize. This was Lauren's fault. And mine, for not seeing what she was doing. Dad, you tried to tell me. You tried to warn me about how she was treating you and treating your clients, and I didn't listen. I thought you were being difficult. I thought you didn't like her, and you were sabotaging us. I don't dislike Lauren. I don't know her well enough to dislike her. But I saw behaviors that concerned me, and I tried to set boundaries. She was using me, Rudolph said. Using my connection to you to try to access your clients. I see that now. She's been asking me for months about your practice, about who you worked with, about how much money your clients had. I thought she was just curious. I didn't realize she was collecting information. What are you going to do? I don't know. We've only been married 3 days and I'm already questioning everything. Lauren keeps saying she was stressed and the wedding pressure got to her and she didn't mean what she said. But Dad, I watched her face when your clients walked out. She wasn't sorry for what she said to you. She was sorry she'd lost access to them. Marriage is complicated, Rudolph. People can change. She might genuinely want to change. Do you believe that? I was quiet for a moment. I could lie and tell him what he wanted to hear, or I could tell him the truth as I saw it. No, I said finally. I don't. I think Lauren is a person who views relationships as transactions. She calculates value and return. That's how she's wired. Some people can change their fundamental operating system, but most people can't. They just get better at hiding it. Rudolph put his head in his hands. I borrowed $50,000 from you for this wedding. I'm in debt for a marriage that might not survive the first year. The money isn't important. It's important to me. I want to pay you back. You will, when you can. But Rudolph, right now, you need to focus on figuring out what you want your life to look like. If you want to make this marriage work, if you think Lauren is willing to do the hard work of changing her patterns, then commit to that. Get couples counseling. Be honest with each other. Build something real. And if I don't think she can change, then you make a different choice. But either way, I'm your father and I love you. That doesn't change regardless of what happens with Lauren. Rudolph stayed for 2 hours. We talked about his marriage, his career, his life. He left looking slightly less devastated than when he arrived. Over the next 3 months, I watched Rudolph's marriage disintegrate in slow motion. Lauren tried to salvage the situation, but she'd burned too many bridges. My clients who'd been at the wedding wanted nothing to do with her. When she tried to reach out professionally, sending emails about potential event planning opportunities, suggesting meetings, asking to be connected with their assistants, she was met with polite but firm refusals. She blamed me for this, of course. According to Rudolph, Lauren became convinced that I had actively poisoned my clients against her. that I'd orchestrated some kind of professional blacklisting campaign. She doesn't understand, Rudolph told me over dinner one night. She thinks you told these people not to work with her. She doesn't get that her own behavior at the wedding did that. Does she take any responsibility for what happened? She says she was stressed and emotional, and you provoked her by leaving early. She says if you'd just stayed and been supportive, none of this would have happened. That's not true, and you know it. Lauren was frustrated because my clients weren't giving her the access she wanted. She'd been building toward that confrontation for months. I know, Rudolph said wearily, but she won't admit it. And living with someone who rewrites history constantly is exhausting. Have you talked about counseling? She refuses. She says therapists are just manipulative people who make money off other people's problems. I think she really means you, but she won't say it directly. 4 months after the wedding, Rudolph moved out of the apartment he shared with Lauren and into a small studio in the Bronx. 2 months after that, he filed for divorce. Lauren contested it, of course. She wanted spousal support. She wanted Rudolph to pay her back for wedding expenses her parents had covered. Expenses that it turned out her parents hadn't actually covered. Lauren had charged them on credit cards, and she wanted me to pay damages for allegedly interfering in her professional opportunities. The legal proceedings were ugly. Lauren's attorney tried to subpoena my client list, claiming I'd actively worked to damage Lauren's business prospects. My attorney shut that down immediately based on confidentiality protections, but it showed how desperate Lauren was to make this someone else's fault. The divorce was finalized after 8 months. Rudolph kept his retirement savings and his car. Lauren got to keep the wedding gifts. Neither of them got much because there wasn't much to divide after the wedding debt. I saw Lauren one more time after the divorce was final. I was leaving a restaurant in Midtown when I ran into her on the sidewalk. She was dressed professionally, clearly coming from or going to a business meeting. "Michael," she said, her voice cold. "Lauren, how are you?" "I'm fine. Rebuilding my business that you destroyed." "I didn't destroy anything. Your behavior at the wedding destroyed your credibility with a specific group of potential clients. You turned them against me. They turned against you when you publicly identified them as therapy patients and then demanded access to them as if they were commodities you deserved access to. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And Lauren, you know it. You're smart enough to understand cause and effect. You wanted something from people who weren't willing to give it to you. And when you couldn't get it, you had a public meltdown that revealed exactly who you are. Who I am. You don't know anything about who I am. You met me a handful of times and decided I wasn't good enough for your son. You're just a judgmental old man who thinks he's better than everyone else because he keeps rich people's secrets. I keep everyone's secrets, not just rich people. That's my job. And I never said you weren't good enough for Rudolph. I said your behavior was inappropriate, and I set boundaries. You're the one who couldn't accept those boundaries. Those boundaries cost me millions in potential business. No, your inability to respect those boundaries cost you potential business. There's a difference. Lauren's face hardened. I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. You broke up Rudolph's marriage and you kept your precious clients safe from someone who might have actually helped them. Helped them how, Lauren? By planning their events? Or by leveraging their connection to me to build your business? She didn't answer. We stood there on the Midtown sidewalk, two people who'd never liked each other, and now never would. I need to go, Lauren said finally. I have a meeting. Good luck with your business, I said, and I meant it. I took no pleasure in her struggles. She walked away without responding. I never saw her again. Rudolph recovered slowly. The divorce had been expensive emotionally and financially, but he seemed lighter afterward, unburdened by the constant tension of living with someone who viewed relationships as strategic assets. I wasted 3 years, he said over dinner about a year after the divorce was final. 3 years of my life on someone who never actually loved me. You learned something important, I said. That's not wasted time. What did I learn? That you value authenticity over ambition. That you want a partner who sees you as a person, not as a stepping stone. That you're strong enough to walk away from something that isn't working even when it's hard. Rudolph smiled, his first genuine smile in months. You sound like a therapist. I am a therapist. You're also my dad. Sometimes I forget you're both. They're not mutually exclusive. We finished dinner and walked back to his new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Park Slope that he'd rented with money from his own savings. No loans required. He was rebuilding his life on his own terms, and I was proud of him. 2 years after the wedding disaster, I got a call from Victoria Hayes. Michael, I wanted to let you know that Lauren reached out to me again, 3rd time this year. What did she want? The same thing she always wants: access, opportunities. She's pitching herself as an event planner who specializes in high-end corporate retreats, and she keeps suggesting that she could provide unique value because of her family connections to influential people. She's still claiming a connection to me? Indirectly. She doesn't name you specifically, but she references relationships with established professionals in the mental health field who work with high-net-worth individuals. It's pretty transparent. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. Don't apologize. I'm calling because I want your permission to handle this more firmly. I've been politely declining her outreach, but she's persistent. I'd like to have my attorney send her a cease and desist letter, making it clear that she has no connection to you, no connection to me, and any claims to the contrary will be treated as fraud. Do you need my involvement in that? Only your permission. I won't reference your practice or your clients specifically. I'll just make it clear that Lauren is misrepresenting her connections and it needs to stop. You have my permission. Thank you for handling this. Michael, you've helped me through some of the hardest times in my life. Dealing with your former daughter-in-law's delusions is the least I can do. Victoria's attorney sent the cease and desist letter. Lauren apparently consulted with her own attorney, who advised her to comply. The outreach stopped. 3 years after the wedding, Rudolph started dating someone new. Her name was Angela. She taught elementary school, and she had no interest in Rudolph's professional connections or his father's client list. She just liked Rudolph for who he was. They dated for a year before getting engaged. The engagement was quiet, just an announcement to family and close friends. No party, no spectacle, no strategic guest list. We're thinking about getting married at City Hall, Rudolph told me. Just immediate family, maybe 10 people total. Is that okay with you? It's your wedding, Rudolph. Whatever makes you happy is fine with me. I know you probably want something more traditional. I want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. I am happy, Dad. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. The City Hall wedding was simple and genuine. Angela's parents were there, warm and kind people who welcomed me immediately. Rudolph's friends from college came. I stood next to my son as he married someone who actually loved him, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. At the small dinner afterward at a restaurant in the West Village, Rudolph stood up to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for being here today, he said, especially my dad. Dad, I know I didn't listen to you the first time around. I know I let someone come between us who shouldn't have. I'm sorry for that. And I'm grateful that you never gave up on me, even when I wasn't making good choices. I'm your father, I said. That's what fathers do. No, not all fathers do that, Rudolph said. Some fathers would have said, I told you so, and walked away. You stayed. You were patient. You let me figure it out on my own. That's real love, and I appreciate it more than I can say. We raised our glasses. Angela squeezed Rudolph's hand. Her parents smiled. My son was happy, genuinely happy, with someone who deserved him. 5 years after the wedding disaster at the Plaza, I retired from my practice. I was 67 years old and ready to step back. I'd spent 35 years listening to people's pain, carrying their secrets, helping them navigate their darkest moments. It was time to rest. My clients threw me a retirement party. Not at the Plaza, none of us could stomach that, but at a private club in Manhattan. Malcolm Strickland organized it. Victoria Hayes gave a speech. James and Patricia Drummond flew in from their winter home in Arizona. The Kowalski brothers brought their wives. Douglas Freeman came with his husband. They'd all known each other for years through me, though they'd never socialized together before. Now they gathered to celebrate someone who'd helped them individually, but never sought recognition or status from those relationships. Michael doesn't do what he does for money or connections, Malcolm said in his speech. He does it because he genuinely cares about people's pain. He sees human suffering and he wants to help alleviate it. That's rare, that's precious, and that's why we're all here today. The party lasted hours. People told stories, appropriately vague to protect confidentiality, about sessions that had changed their lives, insights that had saved their marriages, interventions that had prevented disasters. Rudolph was there with Angela. They'd been married 4 years now and had a daughter, Emma, who was 2 years old. I watched my son holding his daughter, laughing with his wife, and I felt grateful that he'd found his way to real happiness. Near the end of the party, Victoria pulled me aside. "I have some news," she said. "Lauren got married again, to a personal injury attorney she met through work. I hear they have a very transactional relationship. He gets her access to potential clients, she helps him organize settlement negotiations. It's apparently very efficient. I hope she's happy," I said, and I meant it. "Do you really?" "Yes. Not everyone is built for authentic relationships. Some people do better with transactional ones. If Lauren found someone who operates on her wavelength, and they're both satisfied with the arrangement, that's success by their definition." "You're generous. I'm realistic. Lauren isn't evil. She's just wired differently. She sees relationships as strategic assets. That doesn't make her a bad person. It just makes her incompatible with people who prioritize authenticity over utility. Your son is lucky to have you as a father. I'm lucky to have him as a son." The party ended. People hugged me, thanked me, promised to stay in touch. I knew some of them would and some wouldn't, and that was fine. The relationships had served their purpose. I'd helped them when they needed help, and now they were celebrating that help. It was a good ending. Rudolph drove me home, Emma asleep in her car seat in the back. "That was quite a party," Rudolph said. "I didn't realize how many people you'd helped over the years." "Those were just the ones who came to the party. There have been hundreds of others." "Do you ever regret it? Spending your career listening to other people's problems?" "No. It's meaningful work. Pain is universal, Rudolph. Everyone suffers, regardless of wealth or status or success. Being able to help people carry that pain, even briefly, is a privilege." Lauren never understood that, did she? "No. She saw my clients as resources to be exploited, not as people in pain. That's why she couldn't understand their loyalty to me. She thought it was about money or business opportunities. She didn't understand it was about trust earned through genuine care. I'm glad I understand it now. So am I." We pulled up to my building. Rudolph helped me carry some gifts from the party up to my apartment. Emma woke up briefly, smiled at me with that sleepy toddler smile, and asked, "Grandpa coming to breakfast tomorrow?" "If Grandpa wants to," Rudolph said, looking at me. "Grandpa would love to," I said. They left. I stood in my modest apartment, surrounded by gifts from grateful clients and photos of my family, and I felt something I'd spent my whole career helping other people find: peace. 10 years after the wedding disaster, I got an unexpected call. "Lauren." "Michael, it's Lauren Franklin. Well, Lauren Grant now. I got remarried." "I heard. Congratulations. I'm calling because I wanted to talk to you about something. Could we meet for coffee?" I almost said no. What could Lauren possibly want to discuss after a decade? But curiosity won out. Okay, where? We met at a Starbucks in Midtown. Lauren was 42 now, still attractive but harder than she'd been at 28. The ambition was still there in her eyes, but it was tempered by something else now. Maybe experience, maybe disappointment. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm curious what you want to talk about." I wanted to apologize for how I behaved 10 years ago, for how I treated you, for what I said at the wedding, for everything. Okay. I've been in therapy myself for the past few years, working through some things. My therapist helped me see that I was viewing relationships as strategic assets rather than as human connections, that I was treating people like resources to be mined rather than as individuals with their own autonomy. That's good insight. She said I probably do it because of my own insecurity, that I feel like I'm not enough on my own, so I try to attach myself to people who have what I perceive as value: money, connections, status. That's a common pattern. I did it with Rudolph. I saw him as a way to access your clients. I didn't love him for who he was. I loved what he could potentially provide. That wasn't fair to him. No, it wasn't. And I did it with you too. I saw you as a gatekeeper to resources I wanted. I didn't see you as Rudolph's father or as a person with your own boundaries and ethics. I just saw you as an obstacle. I'm glad you've gained this perspective. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Lauren said. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did wrong, and I'm sorry. I studied her across the table. She seemed genuine, but Lauren had always been good at seeming genuine when it served her purposes. What do you want from this conversation? I asked. Just what I said, to apologize, to acknowledge my mistakes. Nothing else? Like what? Like introductions to my former clients? Like help with your business? Like reconciliation with Rudolph? No, I'm married to someone who suits me better. Someone who thinks about relationships the same way I do. It works for us. And I have a successful business now that I built on my own merit, not on borrowed connections. I don't need anything from you, Michael. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Then I accept your apology, and I hope you continue to do well. That's it? You're not going to tell me I'm a terrible person or that I ruined Rudolph's life? You're not a terrible person. You're someone who made mistakes and hurt people while trying to get what you wanted. That's human. And you didn't ruin Rudolph's life. He recovered, remarried someone who actually loves him, and he's happy now. If anything, you taught him what he doesn't want in a partner. That's valuable. Lauren looked like she wanted to say something else, but couldn't find the words. We sat in silence for a moment. I heard you retired, she said finally. 5 years ago. Do you miss it? Sometimes. But I did it for 35 years, that's enough. Your clients must miss you. Some of them stayed in touch. Most moved on to new therapists. That's how it's supposed to work. The ones who walked out with you at the wedding. Did they ever forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. You didn't hurt them directly. You just revealed that you saw them as resources rather than as people. They're wealthy, powerful people who deal with that kind of treatment all the time. They're used to it. But they're not used to it from their therapist's family. No, that's why they were disappointed. Lauren finished her coffee and stood up. Thank you for meeting me, Michael, and for listening. I know you didn't have to. Take care of yourself, Lauren. She left. I sat there for a while, thinking about people and patterns and change. Lauren had gained some insight, that was clear. But had she fundamentally changed? Probably not. People rarely do. They just get better at understanding their patterns and managing them. But that was enough. You don't have to completely transform yourself to live a functional life. You just have to understand yourself well enough to make choices that align with your nature while minimizing harm to others. Lauren had found someone who operated on her wavelength. They had a transactional relationship, that worked for both of them. That was success by their definition, and I had no right to judge it. 12 years after the wedding disaster, Rudolph and Angela invited me to Sunday dinner at their house in Westchester. They'd bought it 2 years earlier, a modest 4-bedroom colonial that reminded me of the house I'd raised Rudolph in. Emma was 12 now, a bright girl who loved reading and wanted to be a writer. Her younger brother Jake was 8, obsessed with dinosaurs and baseball. I'd watched both of them grow up, present for birthdays and school plays and soccer games, the grandparent I'd wanted to be but couldn't be during the Lauren years. After dinner, Rudolph and I sat on his back porch while Angela supervised the kids' homework inside. "Do you ever think about that wedding?" Rudolph asked. "At the plaza?" "Sometimes. Why?" "I was thinking about it today because Angela and I were talking about our wedding anniversary. We've been married 7 years this week, longer than Lauren and I were together total. Time flies. The funny thing is, I barely remember the plaza wedding. I remember being stressed and overwhelmed and feeling like nothing was quite right. But I remember our City Hall wedding perfectly, every detail, because it was genuine. That's usually how it works." I was talking to Emma about it yesterday. She asked why she didn't have any pictures of my first wedding around the house. I told her I was married before I met her mom, but it didn't work out. What did she say? She asked if I was sad about it. I said no, because if I hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't have learned what I really wanted, and I wouldn't have found her mom. That's a good answer. She's a smart kid. She said, so sometimes bad things happen, so good things can happen later. And I said yes, that's exactly right. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Rudolph's backyard. His life was nothing like Lauren had envisioned. No mansion, no powerful connections, no strategic advantages. Just a good job, a loving wife, 2 great kids, and a house in the suburbs. It was everything. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "At the wedding, when you said you were taking people with you, did you know they would actually leave?" "I suspected they might." "How?" "Because I understood why they were there. They weren't there for Lauren's social climbing or for business opportunities. They were there to support me. When Lauren revealed that she didn't understand that, when she publicly identified them as clients and treated them like assets, they had no reason to stay. That must have felt good, watching them walk out with you." "It didn't feel good. It felt necessary. I didn't want to humiliate Lauren at her own wedding. But she backed me into a corner, and I responded the only way I could." "Do you think she ever really understood what happened?" "Eventually. She called me a few years ago to apologize. I think she finally figured out that relationships based on utility are fragile. The moment the utility disappears, so does the relationship. And relationships based on genuine care? Those last, even when they're difficult, even when they're tested." Rudolph smiled. "Like us." "Like us." Angela called from inside that dessert was ready. We went in to join the family. Emma had baked cookies, slightly burned but made with love. Jake showed me his latest dinosaur drawing. Angela poured coffee and told a funny story about her students. It was ordinary and perfect, and exactly what life should be. I'm 77 years old now. Rudolph is 47, Angela is 45, Emma is 17 and applying to colleges, Jake is 13 and still obsessed with dinosaurs and baseball. I see them every Sunday for dinner unless I'm traveling or they are. I still hear from some of my former clients. Malcolm Strickland sends a Christmas card every year. Victoria Hayes calls every few months to catch up. The Drummonds invited me to their 50th wedding anniversary party. These relationships have outlasted the professional context that created them because they were based on something real. Lauren is still married to her attorney husband. According to Rudolph, who hears occasional updates through mutual acquaintances, they're successful and efficient and seem content with their transactional arrangement. She never had children. Her business does well. She and Rudolph haven't spoken in 15 years, and neither of them feels any need to change that. The wedding disaster at the plaza has become family legend. Emma knows the story. Rudolph told her a cleaned-up version when she was old enough to understand. She thinks it's funny that her grandfather once made a dozen rich people walk out of a fancy wedding. "Were you scared?" she asked me once. "Of what?" "Of Lauren. Of what she'd say or do." "No, I was sad for your father, and I was angry at being treated disrespectfully. But I wasn't scared. I knew who I was and what I'd done to earn people's loyalty. Lauren didn't understand that, so she couldn't hurt me. That's kind of badass, Grandpa." "Language, please." "Sorry, but it is." I suppose she's right. There's power in understanding yourself and your relationships clearly. There's strength in knowing the difference between utility and authenticity, between transactions and genuine human connection. Lauren never learned that distinction. She spent years trying to leverage other people's relationships for her own benefit, and she's probably still doing it in different ways. Some people are wired that way and never change. But Rudolph learned it. He learned it through pain and mistake, and ultimately through choosing differently. He built a life based on authenticity rather than ambition, on love rather than strategic advantage. That's success. That's winning. Not the money or the status or the mansion. The genuine relationships, the real love, the life built on something more substantial than calculation and utility. Lauren screamed when she saw those people leaving with me because she finally understood what she'd lost. Not the business opportunities or the connections, but the respect, the trust, the authentic human relationship that can't be faked or manipulated or transacted. That's what she never had and never could have, because she never understood what it was or how it worked. And that's why, 12 years after that disastrous wedding, I still remember standing in that ballroom doorway, watching powerful, successful people choose to walk out with me, not because they owed me anything, but because I'd earned their loyalty through years of genuine care. That's the real power. That's the real wealth. That's what Lauren was screaming about, and that's what I've spent my entire life building. Relationships based on trust and care and authentic human connection that transcend utility and outlast circumstances. Rudolph understands that now. Emma is learning it. Jake will learn it too. And somewhere in Manhattan, Lauren is probably still trying to figure out how to monetize relationships that aren't hers to monetize, wondering why it never quite works the way she thinks it should. The difference between us is simple. I built relationships to help people. She built relationships to use people. I succeeded. She didn't. That's the story. That's what happened at the wedding that destroyed itself.